Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We see our loyal followers. They know what we always ask. Where are you listening in from? So let's
have to
see.
put our hand in front of our face to say hello because we're not, get used to that.
Yeah, we get it started a little early so that people will get their little reminders and come join us.
You know what's really wonderful, guys, is our new platform allows us to show what is happening in remote. If you're using your phone, so you can see those messages coming through on the screen if you're on your phone, which is wonderful.
Yes.
We have people from Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. So don't forget to share with your friends.
Yes, that is our lifeblood. Every time, that's how we've grown. Everything is really almost purely word of mouth, except for some Facebook advertising, but we haven't even done Facebook advertising in probably a year. So we should look at that again. So we do rely on your referrals and spreading the word that, what we have to offer. We appreciate it. Uh-oh, someone says, hello from the frozen tundra of Indiana.
Yeah, someone couldn't hear. And no, Sandra, my Bob is still here. It's just that I wanted to wear my headset today because it could be a little noisy. So it's still there. Yeah, it's just kind of hidden. Got it behind my ears.
Okay, and everyone's hearing us? Just give us a thumbs up, or got someone saying they can't hear.
I think Kathleen was explaining where you could adjust your sound if you had trouble. It's under my bobbing head. But Rebecca can hear us, though. Yeah. So good to see you guys. Familiar faces.
Washington State.
Texas.
I don't think they're talking yet. Yes, we're talking. Ruh-roh.
Oh, Sandra says I can hear now. So she got it fixed.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Very good. All right. What time
we
is
have
it?
Great topics for you guys tonight. We're on the hour.
Very different. Very different topics. So,
and I promise I'm not going to monopolize the whole hour. So Laureen actually gets to present.
Actually, I'm going first to prevent that.
Okay. Maybe I won't get to. She may get.
Just so you know, well, yeah, we'll be fine. We got plenty of time for both these topics. So, and we got some exam passers to share their success. So don't let me forget that at the end to give them a shout out. Let me share my desktop here. There we go. All right. So welcome to our CCO Community Q&A number 1754 with Alicia and myself, Laureen. And this is the Thursday night where we answer the community's questions. These are questions that have come in, and we vet them, and the interns will research it and do the initial slide prep for us. And then Alicia and I go in and tweak it a little bit. And so it's definitely a team effort. So shout out to everyone who's involved in making this happen. We've got Mary, our project manager, that keeps us all in check. So these are the topics we're presenting tonight. So what is forensic medical coding, which is very interesting. I've talked about it when I've taught the coding classes and we get to, particular section in CPT, but this was very interesting to see what the research revealed, and I'll be excited to present that. And then Alicia is going to be presenting From Crisis to Recovery, Mastering Substance Use Documentation and CDI Essentials. I figured that would be more in her purview since she's a CDI queen. And then a shout out to the two interns that helped us tonight, Kristen Estes and Lynn March, for preparing the slide decks. Thank you so much. We have wonderful interns. They're so eager to, work on projects and really everything I think we have them do, they really learn, because when you do research like this and you got to put the slides together, and it's been, I think, a good opportunity. So if anyone's interested, I'll put a link when Alicia's doing her part, if you want to be an intern, or just go to cco.us and you'll see the contact us, and you'll see where the information is for the interns. Let's see. So that's for later. So we're going to go right into the presentations now, and then in between me and Alicia, we'll do a little commercial break, and then Alicia will go. All right, let me get to my first slide here. Share this tab. Okay, so what is, and feel free, Alicia, to jump in if you have something to insert. So what is forensic medical coding? This is going to be very interesting to present, because it's very different from our usual day-to-day coding and billing, and it's called forensic medical coding. And you're going to see this phrase on the slide: specialized application of medical coding for legal and investigative purposes. And that's really the heart of it. We're still using familiar tools like ICD, CPT, HCPCS, but in a totally different context. Cases that might end up in court or in an investigation or in a dispute is when forensic coders would be pulled in. So the goal in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so is not to turn you into forensic experts, but to expose you to this concept and give you a clear picture of what this niche is about and what kinds of problems it solves, and why coders and billers are so valuable in this space. And who knows, you might walk away thinking, hey, this could be a cool career path for me someday. So we talk a lot about pivoting and using our base skills to pivot into different jobs or careers. So let's start with some simple working definition. Forensic medical coding is the specialized application of medical coding, ICD-10-CM, CPT, HCPCS, plus clinical review techniques to analyze medical records and related healthcare documents for legal, investigative, and insurance purposes. So in our usual coding world, we're focused on accurate payment and data reporting. But in forensic coding, we're still translating clinical findings into coded data, but the audience might be an attorney or an investigator or an insurance special investigations unit instead of a payer claim system. So the audience changes. The records we look at can be broader than just a standard medical chart. Medical records, autopsy reports, injury documentation, emergency services reports, anything that's going to help reconstruct what happened, when it happened, and how the medical pieces fit together. So a big part of the job is making sure that the medical coding and the narrative are legally defensible. We're looking for discrepancies, omissions, and documentation issues that could impact liability, causation, as they like to call it, or the value of a claim or a case. So it's still coding, but with a legal lens and a much higher emphasis on detailed explanation and rationale. And to be quite honest, this sounds a lot like when we talk about CDI in the course that we just create or in the process of creating, where it's not just about the coding, it's about the documentation and the true accurate picture of what's going on with the patient or what's happened with the patient. So let's talk a little bit more about how forensic coding differs from clinical or billing and coding. And the first is the purpose is different. So in day-to-day coding, our primary goals are accurate reimbursement and compliance. But in forensic coding, the purpose is to support investigations or to support litigation, expert reports, and sometimes fraud detection. So the codes and the narrative may be used to argue a point in a case, not just to get paid. Second, the scope of the review is much deeper. Instead of just coding what's on today's encounter, you might be reconstructing a timeline. What happened first? What happened over time? What caused what? You might be looking at mechanism of injury, pre-existing conditions, whether the treatment logically matched the documented injuries, that sort of thing. And that can require some medical legal interpretation, not just does this support the code. So that would be a new skill. And then third, the deliverables are different. You're not just dropping codes on a claim. You might be producing a written expert report or an exhibit to be presented in court, or a timeline, a narrative explanation of your reasoning, or even preparing to testify in a deposition or at a trial. So communication skills are being able to explain your thought process to non-coders. And that becomes just as important as the codes themselves. So kind of like CDI, where we're learning how to be good communicators with physicians and ancillary medical staff. Now we're learning how to communicate with lawyers, judges, and that sort of thing. Okay. So now, what is the core task for forensic coders? So now that we know what forensic medical coding is and how it differs from our regular work. So we're going to go into some of the actual day-to-day tasks that you might do as a forensic coder. And this it could be something that you do on the side. It might not be your main job. I know a lot of colleagues that do that. They do court, testifying. So this breaks down into 5 core areas. So first is a systemic review. This is your starting point. You're going to go through medical records, op reports, maybe EMS reports, your emergency medical system reports, and sometimes even autopsy and pathology findings. So it's definitely not going to be something you can quickly skim and like production coding. You're going to be doing a deep, methodical review of everything available, because in a legal setting, what you miss can matter just as much as what you find. So then next is the reconciliation and verification. I did systemic review. Yes, I did. Next is the reconciliation and verification. So this is where you're making sure that treatment that's documented actually matches the codes that were billed and the services that were rendered. So you're essentially checking, does everything line up? And you're doing it with the legal defensibility in mind, meaning could this hold up if someone challenged it? And then third is error identification. And this is a big one. You're actively looking for gaps, coding errors, and inconsistencies that could affect legal or insurance decisions. So maybe a diagnosis doesn't match the procedure, or a data service doesn't align with the injury timeline. These are the kinds of red flags that can make or break a case. Then the next step, we have expert reporting. This is where your findings come together in a formal written report, and you're linking the codes back to clinical facts and compliance standards in a clear and organized way. So you want to think of it as building your case on paper. Attorneys and investigators will rely heavily on these reports. And finally, we have expert testimony. This is one that surprises a lot of coders. Forensic coders can be called to give depositions or even testify in a courtroom as a technical expert for legal reasons, and for legal teams. So you're explaining your methodology, your findings, and defending your conclusions. It's not something everyone feels they could handle. It's public speaking. You're getting up in a courtroom. It's very tense. But it is a real and growing part of the field, and it pays really well, because you have to have that kind of presence as an expert. You have to present yourself as an expert. You can't be meek and mild, and you're defending what your report says, what your findings say. So as you can see, these 5 tasks are going to build on each other. You're going to review, verify, identify problems, report on them, and if needed, testify about them. So it's very structured and very methodical process. And it all starts with the same skills that you're already using every day with your coding. So what skills and knowledge you actually need to do this kind of work? And the good news is a lot of what you already have a strong foundation in is what's on the left side of the slide. On the technical skills side, you need mastery of ICD-10, CPT, and HCPCS. That's your bread and butter. And if you're already coding or auditing, you're building that every single day already. You need a solid understanding of medical terminology and anatomy, plus physiology and pathology knowledge. Why? Because in forensic coding, you're not just assigning codes, you're interpreting what happened clinically and whether the documentation supports it. And then there's data analysis and pattern recognition. This is where you're kind of looking across records, across encounters, and you're looking for maybe years of history and spotting things that don't add up, trends or anomalies, inconsistencies. And that's a skill that gets sharper the more you practice it. Then on the right-hand side of the slide, we have professional skills. And this is where forensic coding starts to feel different from traditional coding. So you need to develop forensic reasoning and logic. And it's about thinking like an investigator, not just what code fits, but does this whole story make sense? Does the documentation support what's being claimed? Then there's the expert report writing. You need to be able to put your findings into a clear, well-organized written report that a non-coder, like an attorney or a judge, can follow. And courtroom communication takes that even further. If you're called to testify, you're going to need to explain maybe complex medical coding. You have to put those concepts in plain, everyday language. And then finally, legal standards and evidence, you need to understand the basics of how evidence works in legal proceedings so that your work holds up under scrutiny. So the takeaway here is that forensic coding is really a blend of clinical experience and professional communication. The technical side is going to get you in the door, but it's your professional skills that are going to set you apart in this niche and have you called on again and again to do this kind of work. So now that we know what forensic coders do and what skills they need, the natural next question is, where do they actually work? And the answer is in more places than you might think. So let's start on the left side of the slide with law firms and legal teams. This is probably the most well-known setting. Forensic coders are going to support either the defense or the plaintiff side in medical damages litigation. So if there's a personal injury case, a malpractice suit, or a workers' comp dispute, the attorneys need someone who can go through the medical records, verify the coding, and help them build or contest the damages claim. And that's where forensic coders come in. Next are insurance companies. This is a huge area. Insurance carriers need forensic coders to conduct claims reviews, investigate subrogation cases. And that's when they're trying to determine which party is financially responsible and detect fraud. If a claim looks suspicious, a forensic coder can dig into the records and the codes to see if what's being billed actually matches what's documented. And this is where that pattern recognition skill we talked about is going to really pay off. Then we have government agencies and medico-legal offices. So think like medical examiner offices or regulatory agencies, any government body that needs coded reviews for investigative or legal purposes. Forensic pathology is a great example. When a death investigator requires a detailed review of medical history and treatment, a forensic coder can help translate those records into coded data that supports that investigation. And finally, independent expert consultants. This is where a lot of experienced forensic coders end up. They work as retained experts. That's what a lot of my colleagues that do this work are. They're retained experts, providing audits, or they handle appeals. They offer litigation experience on a case-by-case basis. So this can be a really rewarding path because you get to work on a variety of cases across different areas of law and medicine, and it pays well. So whether you see yourself in a law office or an insurance company or a governmental agency or hanging your own shingle as a consultant, there are real opportunities out there for coders that want to move into this space. So this slide is really about driving home why precision matters in forensic coding. And the short answer is because the stakes are really high. They're incredibly high. So look at what forensic coding conclusions can directly affect case outcomes. They can affect settlement amounts, regulatory decisions, and even criminal findings. So that's not just a denied claim or a compliance audit. We're talking about things that can change someone's life. So whether a plaintiff gets compensated fairly, or whether a provider faces sanctions, or someone is held criminally liable, your coded analysis can play a role in all of that. So you have to be, I guess, made of strong stuff to be okay with, your work might end up in, someone going to jail. But if it's warranted, right? And so here's the thing. If your work has errors, though, or if your opinions aren't clearly explained or well supported, they can and will be challenged. The opposing counsel or opposing experts are going to go through your report line by line during their discovery. They're going to ask you to justify every code, every conclusion, every connection that you made between the records and your findings. And if you can't back it up, or at least articulate, your backup, then it's going to weaken the entire case. So that's why this slide is emphasizing using transparent methodology and precise linkage between records and codes. What does that actually mean in practice? It means that every time that you assign a code or draw a conclusion, you should be able to point to the exact documentation that supports it. Draw that line. It means that your process should be consistent and repeatable. Someone else following your same methodology should arrive at the same conclusions. So I like to think of it as kind of building a bridge between the medical record and your coded opinion. Every piece of that bridge needs to be solid. If there's a gap or a weak spot, that's exactly where someone on the other side is going to go in and push, try and break it apart. So accuracy isn't just a best practice in forensic coding. It's really the foundation of everything you do in that niche. All right, so now you might be thinking, this sounds really interesting, but how do I actually get into forensic coding? So this slide lays out a 4-step path. Step 1, build a strong foundation. And honestly, many of you are already doing this. You need to master ICD, CPT, and HCPCS. That's a very important baseline step. Keep those skills current with regular code set updates. Then forensic work demands accuracy. And if you're working with outdated code knowledge, that's going to be a problem. So stay sharp and up to date on your fundamentals. Step 2, seek specialized training. This is where you start layering on the forensic specific knowledge. Things like forensic auditing techniques, expert witness preparation, and medical legal report writing. And you can find this through professional organizations, workshops, and specialized courses. Maybe CCO will make one. This is the kind of training that bridges the gap between clinical coding and the legal world. Then step 3, you want to gain some hands-on experience. There's no substitute for actually doing the work under maybe someone's tutelage. And that means getting involved in chart reviews, working with autopsy reports, and handling those medical and legal documents. If you can find a mentor, someone who's already doing forensic coding, or shadow an experienced forensic coder or legal consultant, then that would be very, very valuable. Real world experience is what takes you from understanding these concepts we're talking about tonight to actually being confident in applying them. Then finally, step 4 is pursue certification. Look into various certifications and coursework that strengthen your coding credentials and your forensic credibility. There are no forensic medical coding credentials, at least not that I know of. If anyone in the chat knows of any, let me know. But there's all of your certifications as a certified coder, pretty much in any type of coding. CDI would be a very helpful credential for blending your coding and clinical knowledge together. So having that credibility as a coding expert will really help. And that makes you much more attractive to law firms, insurance companies, and consulting agencies. These multiple credentials look good. So think of this as a progression, a foundation, training, experience, credibility. So you're not going to be able to do it all overnight. You're building on it, but at least you have a roadmap if this is something that interests you. So now we're going to bring everything we've been talking about to life with a real world example. So this is case 1, emergency department upcoding. So if you look at the clinical summary on the left, we have a patient who presents with mild ankle sprain after a fall. The exam is performed, the x-ray comes back negative, and the patient is discharged with an ACE wrap. Pretty straightforward, right? This is a low complexity encounter. But look at the middle column. The build codes. They build 99285, which is high complexity ED visit, and a CPT code 73610, which is a complete ankle x-ray with 3 or more views. Now, if you're a coder, alarm bells should be going off right now. A mild ankle sprain with a negative x-ray and discharge with an ACE wrap doesn't really support high complexity, and a complete multi-view x-ray series doesn't really match what was documented. So on the right-hand side, you can see the correct codes and the documentation actually supports a 99282, which is a low complexity ED visit, and the CPT 73600, which is a 2-view ankle x-ray. Those align more with the clinical picture. So at the bottom, we have the statement that the forensic finding documentation supports a low-level visit and a 2-view x-ray. The build codes reflect upcoding. So this is, a textbook example of the kind of discrepancy a forensic coder would catch. The provider might have just been sloppy with the code selection, or it could be part of a pattern of intentional upcoding. Either way, the forensic coder's job is to identify the gap between what was documented and what was billed, explain it clearly, and let the legal or investigative team take it from there. This is where your coding knowledge becomes incredibly powerful in a forensic context. So it's very much like an audit, but you're auditing it in a little different way for defensibility. So that should not feel really, all that different. Here's another example, and this one's is really common in forensic coding, a workers' comp claim. So if you look at the clinical summary, a worker claims a back injury from lifting boxes, but when you actually review the documentation, it shows chronic low back pain with no acute injury documented. That's a really important distinction. And when we look at the build codes, they build ICD S39.012A, which is a strain of muscle, fascia, and tendon of the lower back, the initial encounter. That A at the end tells us it's being coded as an initial encounter. Sorry, I lost my place here because I have someone calling me and interrupting my webinar. So the correct code on the right is M54.50, low back pain, and that's unspecified low back pain, and that's a little different clinical picture. So one says new acute injury from a workplace incident, and the other says ongoing chronic pain. And in a workers' comp case, that difference can mean thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars in claim value. The forensic finding at the bottom spells it out clearly. S39.012A would misrepresent the injury and inflate the claim. The correct coding reflects chronic pain, not a new injury. So this is the exact kind of scenario you would encounter as a forensic coder, and it adds tremendous value. You're not just catching a wrong code, you're identifying a misrepresentation that could affect claim payment, employer liability, and potentially even fraud. And it all comes down to reading the documentation carefully and making sure the codes tell the story. I'm going to skip case 3 because we got to move on. All right, so let's just bring it all together. And those cases you can go look at in the club. We'll have all of this up in the club where we always put our handouts and the replay and all that good stuff. So this is a good slide at the end to pause on because it summarizes everything that we covered so far. Forensic coding supports legal and investigative purposes. It's not routine billing. That's the fundamental, shift in the mindset. You're using the same coding skills, but very different application and very different audience. Second, it requires mastery of coding, medical knowledge, and forensic reasoning. You need the technical foundation, but you also need to think critically and analytically in a way that goes beyond standard code assignment. And then third, the core tasks are review records, reconciliation, error detection, expert reporting, and testimony. And we walked through all 5 of those earlier, and you saw how they build on each other in a very logical progression. Fourth, accuracy matters. And we really drove this home. Your coding conclusions can directly affect the case outcomes and settlement amounts. And the stakes are real, and the work needs to be bulletproof. Fifth, there are multiple career paths. You can work across law firms, insurance companies, government agencies, and consulting roles. There's no single path, and it just depends on where your interests and strengths take you or where opportunities arise. And then sixth, the roadmap to getting started. Build your foundation first, seek specialized training, gain hands-on experience, and pursue certifications that strengthen your credibility. And if you take one thing away from today, I hope it's this. The skills you already have as coders and billers are incredibly valuable in the forensic space. And it isn't a completely foreign world. It's an extension of what you already do. It's a niche type of coding. And you can do it in an applied way that can really make a real difference in legal and investigative outcomes. Let's see, I think we got some resources for you. And now we're going to take a little commercial break. Did we have any questions?
Not necessarily questions per se, asking about credentials that might be beneficial to get. And Kathleen just put up HIM malpractice insurance. Absolutely. And I know that.
Oh, I forgot I left the comments on the whole
Monique had said that she'd be interested in doing that. I think her past background would be beneficial too. Tanya had stated that she has a friend who's a paralegal and that had asked some questions. And I know in my experience in doing expert witness work, the real key in doing that is 2 things. Your skills as a coder, but also if you're a biller, that's incredibly important too, to know both sides of that world. And probably what the outside help you can get in education, and they have areas like Laureen said that will teach you how to do it. I think SEEK, it's either SEEK or SEAK. They have an expert witness program to train you on how to write the reports. The reports is really the key. You look at the information, you submit a report, and then with that report, they may settle out of court and you don't have to do a deposition. And when you do a deposition nowadays, a lot of times it's not in front of people in court. It's done virtually a lot of times. But man, I've read those and they drill you. I mean, you're a hostile witness to the other side. So
I'm clicking on these 2 resource links. Uh-oh, the second one didn't work. I'll have to figure that out. I got the first one in there, so you could take a look at that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do a little commercial break. So this is where we like to remind people, because we get people from the old days going, I'm here, where's my CEU? We don't do it that way anymore. It became too much of an administrative headache. So only the club members get CEUs. We do have 2 free CEUs in the CCO.Academy website. There are update webinars that we do every year and Find a Code sponsor. So you can check them out for the free CEUs, but our club members get the CEUs. This Q&A webinar, sometimes we get it approved for CEUs, sometimes we don't. It depends on the content, but we always get the club webinars approved for CEUs. So this is our community Q&A webinar. And all of our trainings, we do live, we stream. Everybody's allowed to listen and learn for free. But if you want to support us and, become a club member, it's, $25 a month, or you could get it for $249, which basically saves you $50 a year if you pay for it annually. There's some additional benefits if you do annual over monthly. And then we also have the Club Plus, which is where you can take 2 courses and have the club membership, rolled into one. Because some people are on a mission and they want to do like medical terminology and the CPC prep course, or they are doing risk adjustment and they're learning pharmacology with it, or they're doing CDI and they want to learn pathophysiology with it. So like they like to do things in pairs. So that's what the Club Plus is. So if you're interested in any of those 3, just go to cco.us club. And that will tell you all about the options. Oops, slow down, Lori. And this is just our slide about our CDI course. Alicia is recording chapter 2 this week. She finished chapter 1. We did it twice. It's a new course, so we were trying to make sure it's perfect. So chapter 1 is done, and we're moving on to chapter 2. There's going to be, I think, 13 to 14 total chapters. It's actually, in hindsight, we're like, this is more like a
full course.
Versus what we call an ancillary course. So it's going to have a lot of content, but what's nice about it is you're getting both sides, inpatient and outpatient. You're getting the whole picture. Whether you use it or not, you learn so much. Just like we talked about the forensic, even if you've never become a forensic coder, you understand the concept now. So when it's mentioned, you don't feel like, so in the dark. So it's only priced at $724. Check it out, CDI-course, cco.us/CDI-course. This slide is just for me to remind you that we have a new pricing option. You can either pay for the whole course, which is, they're normally priced at $1447 for our larger courses and the $724 for our ancillary courses. But we also have a subscription model. So if you just want to rent the course and just get it done, and you don't need lifetime access, then do the subscription model. It's only $59 a month. Maybe you got locked into another course that you kind of regret and it's boring and you're not getting good support. Well, come supplement it with us for a few months, $59. We do a welcome call. We encourage you. Any questions you have, we help answer it, and you get access to our Cody bot, which is phenomenal in our new platform. And it really, you could do practice exercises with the Cody bot. I just finished chapter 3 of the CDI course. Can you ask me some review questions before I take the test? Boom, boom, boom. And it just, until you just do one question at a time, it doesn't get tired. It might get exhausted with all the, you'll get to the end of the material at some point, but yeah, so those are the new pricing options. Consider that. The lifetime does come with a lot more bonuses. You get the blitzes, you get the practice exams, you get more phone support. So it's definitely worth doing if you can afford it, but and you aren't already in a course. Otherwise, consider the $59 a month.
So Fabina wants to know if we ever teach live virtual classes. We do live webinars, but if that's something you're interested in, just reach out and we'd be more than happy to discuss it. There would be a lot of details involved, so there'd be criteria involved. But if there's something you're interested in, you can approach us.
It's hard to do live cohorts, but if we have a group, like we have had medical groups where we've taught their whole team, so that's a possibility. But if you have a group of people, we certainly would, be willing to consider it. But everything's pretty much pre-recorded, so you can consume it and go through it at your own pace. But what makes us different is our middle name, coaching, certification coaching organization. So we really want you to cross the finish line. We want you to get that credential. You're not just a number to us. We really want you to succeed. So, and hopefully maybe some of our students in the chat could attest to that. But, and at least now with the $59 plan, you could try us out and you have a month. And if it's not for you, then that's the most you've lost. You didn't plunk down almost $1,500 like with these other places.
Yeah. And I think it's Monica, not Monique, that had some specific questions that we answered. Sorry about that, Monique, because when I looked at your name, I said Monica, and then I realized, no, that's not right. And I said, it's Monique. And then I thought, no, it's not. It's Monica. Oh, where are my brains at tonight? It's being very exotic, I guess.
Yeah, we try to make those names exotic. So yeah, check out the CCO.Academy. It is free to join. There's lots of free stuff in there, guys. Lots of good conversation going on in there, but not too much. That's what I like about it. It's not overwhelming, and it's a nice, warm group of people. The interns are like the welcoming committee, and really good questions are being asked, and very good, thorough answers are being provided to coding cases you might encounter at work, those sorts of things, career advice. I got a credential. I want to get another one. What's a good next one? So check it out. I also do consultations for free in the evenings and Saturday mornings. So if you would like to talk to me about career advice, course advice, anything like that, maybe you're in a course and you're not happy and you just need some help figuring out what you can do to bridge the gap. Schedule a call with me, cco.us/Laureen-call, and I'd be happy to help you. Topic requests. Tonight, we're doing 2 topics. You just saw a very interesting one on forensic coding. Any questions you have, it could be a case that you want us to code together, some sort of challenge at work, or maybe it's a career-related question. We handle it all. So it's cco.us/topic-request.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and this is the slide. So our congratulations slide. So did I go over one too quick? I thought that, yeah, January. So Leanne J passed her CPCD exam. That's the dermatology one. And
that's cool.
What she said, well, you want to read the comment, Alicia? Since
it's too small, I can't.
Oh, is it too small for everybody else?
No, it's too small for me because I have you on my small screen. I can, there.
So it says, I know. Can you read it?
No. Go ahead.
I know that CCO does not offer any prep for the dermatology exam, but being able to use the BAT technique and review helpful videos and lessons on how to code dermatology scenarios has definitely given me the confidence to pass the exam on my first try with the CCO proven test-taking tools and techniques. Thanks, CCO. On towards getting my CPB certification next. So this is someone we just recently helped within the community area. She wasn't really taking a course. So this is the kind of support you can get from us. So congratulations, Leanne. That's wonderful. Very happy for you. And I don't think we did the slide. Did we do these slides for December? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
So Laura P passed the CPC exam, and she said, I really enjoyed being able to learn at my own pace. Anytime I had a question, I received prompt responses, and I really appreciated that. And Janice passed the CPC exam as well, and she said, I am beyond ecstatic that I passed my exam. At one point, passing the exam felt unachievable. Thanks to the BAT system and the test-taking tips, I was able to find my composure and taking the exam to feel confident that I did good about it right as I was pushing the submit button. Thank you, CCO.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's a good testimony.
Feel good moment.
And in November, Charlotte passed the CPC, and she said, I was thrilled to pass the CPC a few days ago on the first try. CCO has given me a lot of good advice, a lot of good support, and obviously a lot of knowledge. My one and only comment to anyone starting out is not to get discouraged if it takes you a while. I honestly do not know how anyone with a full-time job, mine included overtime, and or relationships, and or the need for sleep and regular exercise could learn all this and do all the exercises, etc. in a few months. It took me 1 intense year, but I passed. So congratulations to all of our exam passers. Very exciting. Okay, so we're going to move on to yours. Alicia, did you want to drive your own deck, or you want me to drive?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and drive, and I will. I've got it all set up on my big screen. Let's see. I hope you enjoy this presentation as much as the forensic, because that was really exciting. Very good. All right. We are going to look at from crisis to recovery. And this is all about mastering substance use documentation and the CDI essentials that go with that. So we're looking at coding use, abuse, dependence, and recovery status. Now, you would think if you knew use, abuse, and dependence, that would, get you through. However, there's more than that. And there's also some new codes that happen. I'm going to speak kind of quickly because we have a lot of content to cover, but as we've said before, you can find this information in the CCO Club. So the first thing is the learning objectives. We're going to look at use, abuse, and dependence and understand how to code for that with the documentation. We're also going to look at substance use disorders and the ICD codes that go along. Documentation of severity. Mild, moderate, and severe are the key terms that we're looking for in documentation. Also, when a person has stopped using, they go into remission status, but there's also an early sustained remission. So it's just not that they stop, there's criteria for that. And it's all based on documentation. There's coding for withdrawal, intoxication, and associated complications, which is often overlooked. And then we're going to some of those CDI best practices to make sure that we're getting everything done correctly. The area is in behavioral health that these codes fall into. The documentation gap that we usually see is the fact that we don't see acute medical surgical programs. The CDI for those and behavioral health are completely different. The documentation of substance use disorders is pretty widespread. It affects all specialties. There's vague documentation that you usually see, kind of makes the hair on the back of a behavioral health coder's neck stand up when they just put history of drug use. That's just not enough information and qualifies for a query. Missing specificity on remission, withdrawal, and complications that make it difficult to get to the highest specificity. Now, what's at stake? Why do we need to know this? Because one, of risk adjustment, we have to be able to show risk even when we're leveling. Population health and outcome measurements are using this data. So if we aren't coding the highest specificity, we're skewing that data. Also, provider compliance and audit vulnerability. If you make a mistake, they can go back like 3 years and start recouping. Patient care planning and continuity. It's all about the patient ultimately. And we talk about that a lot actually in the CDI course. Why is SUD documentation matter? Because the substance use disorders are high comorbid health conditions, even smoking. When you're coding for surgery, you will see in the pre-surgery documentation how a lot of procedures, they won't even do them until the patient has gone so many months without smoking. And you wouldn't think that smoking was that severe. However, it truly affects the vascular system so severely that the surgeons don't want to touch them. And so, and this is for all different types of surgery. It's really, really important. There is withdrawal and intoxication. These are medical emergencies often. The recovery status, the remission directly impacts the prognosis and the treatment plan. So the plan of care, going forward with a patient, how do we deal with that? Associated complications, liver disease, cardiac issues, psychiatric sequelas, they all require parallel treatment. So you're not just treating the substance use, you're also treating all the other conditions that are related to that substance abuse. The organizational value, again, risk adjustment models, they really depend on being accurate with SUD severity documentation. The payers intensify audits on behavioral health claims, because there's been a lot of fraud and abuse in that area in the past, and OIG often uses that in one of the areas that they look at. Quality metrics require complete documentation, and funding models really are increasingly tied to accurate diagnosis capture. So the codes that we're looking at are F codes. They start out with F10, that is alcohol, to go all the way to F19, which is other psychoactive substances. I'm not going to go through and read those because they're listed for you. However, it's a good idea to make sure you understand what each of these are. You don't have to have the codes memorized because they're at your fingertips. However, we need to be sure that we understand that there is specific codes for all types of use. And then the key principle, just know that each substance gets its own code pathway, and there's severity involved. So each of those have mild, moderate, and severe, and the status determines specific code selection. So again, it's not just F17 for nicotine use. There's more characters involved, meaning a higher specificity for the code set. Now, what's the difference between use, abuse, and dependence? This is pretty basic. If you are a first-time coder or you're working on your credential right now, know that you will get tested on use, abuse, and dependence. If you guys are seasoned coders and you just need a refresher, use is, really unspecified. It means that the patient uses or consumes this substance, and then it's going to be an F1, whichever substance it is, 0.9, which again, 9s are historically unspecified, not all the time, but historically. So an example would be patient reports occasional cannabis use. That would be an F1, whichever cannabis was. Cannabis is 2, F1 2.9. But if the patient is in abuse, this is mild substance use disorder. It's harmful or hazardous. Causes psychological and physical harm. It does not meet dependence criteria, however. Now, let's say, again, we're talking about cannabis, then the code path for that would be F12.1 for abuse. And again, there's other characters that could expand in these codes. Example, patient reports cocaine use resulting in DUI arrest. There you go. Dependence is moderate, severe, and this is a substance use disorder, SUD. So strong desire, difficulty controlling use, persistent despite consequences. And this is verbiage that you will see in the documentation. Physical tolerance, withdrawal symptoms, code path would be the F1 code 0.2 for dependence. Now, the example that we have here is patient states opioid use disorder with daily use, multiple failed quit attempts, physical withdrawal symptoms. And again, you don't necessarily have to determine what's use, abuse, and dependence, although the key verbiage could be there. Your clinician should be stating use, abuse, or dependence. If not, you can feel confident that you can query on these. So what does
Alicia,
severity
what do you
look like?
got going on over there? You got a rooster in your room?
No, I just kicked the cat. The cat was scratching, and she's got a cone of shame on. And so she was under I knew she was by my foot, so I just kicked her and she went in the other room. I was hoping
I figured it was worthy of, of us explaining what's going on. So people are like,
yeah, I didn't know if you would kick. So are mine coming through on the headset?
I don't know, but we can hear it.
Oh gosh.
Whatever the little pet's doing. But I just wanted to, at least acknowledge it so people weren't like, is that sound coming from somewhere else?
Yeah, I'll look. Let me just
look
we'll
real
manage.
Quick. We're casual.
Okay. I think I've got it on. I think I just switched it now.
Yes, it sounds stronger now. Yep.
Okay.
I feel bad because I thought on the headset the whole time that you weren't hearing it, but I did kick the cat and it left the room. Poor thing. Jeez.
Not hard,
Back
not
to
hard.
this slide. We're going to look at mild, moderate, and severe. Now, these are DSM-5. DSM-5 classifications. That is another, it's not a code set. It's kind of like our ICD-10 index. It explains and gives definitions to diagnoses in in this realm in behavioral health. So mild, they would state that has 2 to 3 criterias, some functional impact, but not severe. They give you the codes. An example would be that cannabis use causing missed work times 2 times a month. Okay, so that's mild. Moderate, you've got 4 to 5 criteria met. So this is significant functional impairment. There's dependence is moderate, alcohol dependence with tolerance, multiple failed quit attempts, relationship conflict. So see how they're adding those different things. And again, you are not required to determine that, what's mild, moderate, and severe. You need to be able to determine what is in fact something you need to query if they don't state mild, moderate, or severe. And then last, severe would be 6 or more of the criteria met. Severe functional impairment, pervasive life disruption, and the example, methamphetamine dependence with daily use, criminal activity, medical complications, and psychiatric symptoms. But the documentation reality here is that, again, the provider must document enough clinical detail for you to justify severity assignment. And if you don't know, then you query to confirm. Remission status is early versus sustained. Definition of remission: the patient has not met diagnostic criteria for substance use disorder for a defined period. The provider must explicitly document remission status. The coder cannot infer. Now, this is just common knowledge, but what's early remission look like versus sustained remission? 3 to 11 months abstinence and controlled use, that would classify as early remission. An example would be of documentation: patient reports 6 months sobriety from alcohol use disorder after treatment. Okay. Then for sustained, that's 12 plus months abstinence and controlled use. Let's look at that example. Patient with 2 years sustained remission from opioid use disorder continues medication assisted treatment. That clinical documentation gap, many notes are going to say history of drug use. That's just not enough information. It's without specificity. We don't know what the remission status is, and this is a real CDI opportunity where you'd absolutely want to query. Now, what's the difference between intoxication and withdrawal? Well, intoxication is acute and withdrawal is time limited. So the criteria or what you're going to look for intoxication, it's active substance present in body causing behavioral or psychological changes, or physiological, excuse me. That gives you the codes there to look at, but then you may also include specific intoxication codes for complications. The example, patient presenting with acute alcohol intoxication, coordination problems, altered mental status. But let's look at withdrawal. This is a predictable psychological response to the cessation after prolonged use. The subtypes, you've got uncomplicated, you've got perceptual disturbance, or with delirium. Now, the example, alcohol withdrawal with tremor, autonomic hyperactivity, or anxiety. And then another example is alcohol withdrawal, delirium with hallucinations, confusion, or seizure risk. Now, the clinical importance here, though, is that withdrawal is a medical emergency in substances like alcohol are benzodiazepines, and they require monitoring and treatment. A lot of times when a person is going to um, decide that they're going to stop using whichever one of these are, that's why they'll go and have an inpatient status someplace so that they can be monitored. Then associated complications and comorbidities. These are often overlooked, and we want to make sure that we have that proper documentation. For substance-induced disorders coded with primary SUDs, we have mood disorders, we have psychotic disorders, anxiety disorders, neurocognitive disorders, sleep disorders, which is very common, and sexual dysfunction. When we looked at medical complication, now a lot of times this will have dual coding, alcoholic liver disease, and that could be alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver. There's all kinds of them. Opioid-induced constipation, alcohol-induced pancreatitis, cocaine-induced myocardial infarction, and cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which is a new code for us. So that's good to know that they're able to code that now, not just hyperemesis. And they got that code because it's so incredibly common. Documentation requirements mean that the provider needs to explicitly document substance-induced relationships. Again, we can't assume. So just because the patient goes into the ER and they can't stop throwing up and it states that they use cannabis, we can't assume that it's cannabis hyperemesis syndrome unless the doctor documents and links those. So again, those cannot be assumed by you. But if you see that and you know that's available, absolutely it is worthy of a query. Some real world examples, poor documentation here would be history of alcohol abuse, currently in recovery, patient reports anxiety. That is just not going to give us enough information. And you can see why when you look at all those red X's. We don't have a current status. We don't have severity. We don't have anything linked. We don't have the timeline, and we're missing those associated complications if there is some. What would be ideal is if we saw patient with alcohol dependence, severe, ding ding, currently in sustained remission, 13-month sobriety post inpatient treatment, ding ding, another great documentation, reports ongoing anxiety related to stress triggers. There you go, comorbidity. Attends AA meetings 3 times a week, continues supportive outpatient therapy, denies current substance use, medical, no current liver disease, prior alcohol-related gastritis, which is resolved. So therefore, the coding results allow us to code F10.21, which is alcohol dependence in remission, and F41.1, generalized anxiety disorder, if independent, not substance induced. Now, another example would be opioid user presenting with withdrawal symptoms, having trouble at work. Again, we're missing all the vital information. However, with proper documentation, we might see an example of patient with opioid use disorder, moderate severity, presenting with acute withdrawal, day 2 post cessation, reporting tremor, muscle aches, anxiety, sweating, insomnia, works as construction worker, concerned about lost income during withdrawal treatment, enrolled in 7-day medically supervised detoxification, followed by medication assisted treatment, which is abbreviated MAT. And social stressors, housing instability, custody concerns, driving motivation to achieve recovery. So therefore, we're able to code F11.23, which is the opioid dependence with withdrawal, specific if uncomplicated. And then F11.230 or with complications. Homelessness is the Z59.0, which is a social determination of health. Additional codes for specific withdrawal manifestations as they occur if they're documented. man, my mouse is jumping. Best practices is going to be document current status explicitly. Patient is currently in sustained remission from cocaine dependence, 16 months, not history of cocaine abuse. And for severity, which meets the DSM-5 criteria, alcohol dependent, severe with tolerance, multiple quit attempts, continued use despite consequences, work loss versus alcohol dependence. So you can see how the details are really important. Link complications to substance use, like alcohol-induced depressive disorder versus independent MDD, or patient has depression. Captured associated medical conditions, document dual coding, SUD code plus medical condition code, and then what you might see, which would be poor documentation, only coding substance use without capturing medical sequela. The documentation of withdrawal or intoxication details. Good documentation is acute alcohol intoxication with altered mental status, respiratory depression being monitored, or intoxicated. And then last example is update status over time. And this is often a gap in area for opportunity. Track progression from active use, withdrawal, stabilization to recovery versus single documentation that becomes outdated. Patient is cannabis use, for example. Now, screening, we want to look at the assessment and documentation tools. So recommended screening tools, there is one that's called AUDIT, which is the Alcohol Use Disorder Identification Test. And then there's the DAST-10, which is Drug Abuse Screening Test. There's also the NIDA Quick Screen and the ASAM Criteria, American Society of Addiction Medicine. Now, these are common ones that you'll see documented, and you can code them as screenings. There's Z codes for that. Key documentation elements, we're going to be seeing substance type and pattern use, age of onset and duration, severity indicators, prior treatment attempts and outcomes, current status and remission timeline, and motivation for change or co-occurring mental health and medical conditions, as well as social determinants like housing, employment, social support. And I would encourage you to do a quick review of all of the social determinations of health, because a lot of them can apply. Not just the few that they're mentioned here. And when you're looking at your software, your AHR integration, you're going to add the SDOH screenings alongside the SUD assessments. There's codes for that. Configure prompts for severity status and withdrawal documentation, and use structured templates capturing F10 through F19 coding requirements. There are auto text or dot phrase. If you use Epic, you use dot phrase. A lot of them call them auto text or smart phrases that allow you not to miss all those steps. Barriers would be common barriers that you see often. Insufficient training in those F codes and what criteria is needed for specificity. Stigma and discomfort documenting substance use details, because again, now the patient gets to see the documentation when they walk out, because they get that like a pre-signed document synopsis of the visit. Lack of standardized assessment tools, your EHR templates not optimized for these SUDs, and unclear how to document comorbidities. Again, big gap there. Time constraints in busy clinic settings, and that's where it's easy to just say history of use. Organizational solutions. It's one thing to have these barriers, but it's another to actively be seeking solutions. And here's some great examples. Train the clinicians to use the DSM-5 criteria, which gives a severity assessment and works very well with the ICD structure. Standardized SUD assessments using the ASAM or ASAM or similar framework. create structured EHR templates with drop downs for status, severity, and substance. Again, that's where you get the smart phrases, dot phrases, or auto text. Implement CDI programs specifically for behavioral health encounters, and then link those SUD documentations to risk assessment and quality measures, and partner with addiction specialists for complex cases. In other words, getting more specificity in the details of what's happening to the patient as they're going through, say, the withdrawal process. So you can document all of that. Was that it? Oh, no, there's one more. Nope, it's duplicated. I'm sorry. It is. Same thing. And that's it, guys. I did it. I don't usually get through everything that fast.
That's what happens when you're at the end.
Yeah.
No, that was really good. So let's see. Got some thank yous coming in. A couple questions, really good questions that needed more of a longer, thorough reply. So I put it in the Academy and put a link in the chat. So, but these are the kind of questions we can help answer and flesh out for you. But yeah, these are two very interesting topics.
Meaty topics. Thank you guys for those. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to send in your topic requests.
Yeah.
Can you still hear the cat? She's over there doing it again. I don't have anything to throw at her.
Tone of shame off.
Yes, she does. If I had something I could throw at her, I would.
Yeah. All right.
Golly.
Let's not get them calling the what is it called? The SP, the animal protection.
Yeah. That Alicia from CCO, she abuses her cat, puts a cone on it, and then throws things at it.
All right, everyone. Well, then I guess we won't keep you any longer. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for referring people. And come join us over at the Academy in between Thursdays. Thanks Alicia.
Guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Looking for medical coding, medical billing, and risk adjustment education? Learn more at cco.us.